Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge and welcome to Outlander Season 6, Episode 6, The World Turned Upside Down, my recap and breakdown with a little bit of discussion and sass thrown in because I'm not the meek and obedient type. See how I just made that roll? Okay, are y'all okay? Because I don't know if I'm okay after that episode. Holy crap. Wow, I have so many feelings. And again, as I've said episode after episode, very impressed. Like, just so impressed with the adaptation skills that have been happening this season, as well as the acting, just how it is put, just all of it put together was, I'm honestly just really stunned and thrilled with how it's going. Like, I'm just loving it. I'm loving it. So we're going to dive into this. There's a lot to go over. I liked kind of the length of my episode recap last time, so we're going to try to keep it at 30 minutes again to get going, but we get right into everything. This was another longer episode too. It was over an hour. And just in case you didn't hear or you haven't seen a post, there won't be an episode next week for Easter in, the United States. A lot of us celebrate that. So it will be 2 weeks before it comes back. And so I believe that is April 24th that it will be back. I don't have a calendar in front of me, but I think that's what Diana said. She posted in her Facebook group that it will be 2 weeks. But the last 2 episodes of the season are going to be full feature movies. They're going to be hour and a half long ones. They might even be longer than that, but they're going to be 90-minute episodes, the last 2 episodes. So there was also something else someone corrected for me, a couple things I wanted to touch on. Number 1, the man that is dead in the tent that Malva takes some fingers from is apparently the Sin Eater from the episode when Granny McNabb or Granny Mc... whoever it was who died. It wasn't Granny McNabb. She's from Lollybrook. But her who died, Hiram Crombie's mother-in-law. That's who it is. We'll go with that. And also, I believe someone had mentioned too that they aren't going to try to shove all of season 6 book 6 into season 6. The first 3 episodes of season 7 will wrap up it won't wrap up the plot, but we'll wrap up the plot lines of season 6. And I have to assume, my guess is that will have to do with the Bree and Roger things that are going to come up, which again, I won't spoil forward, but just based on where things end with this, I'm pretty sure the next 2 episodes will be dealing with the fallout of the murder of Malva and her child. Who is the father? All of that will happen, I believe, in the next 2 episodes, as well as the war stuff is heating up. So I could foresee that the first couple episodes, the plot that will be held over will probably be the Bree and Roger and what's going to happen with that. And I think that makes sense just because they're not having her even look very pregnant yet. And it isn't going to be the birth of the baby and they immediately know everything that's happening with that. But anyway, we're not skipping ahead. Let's start with where we start. So we begin this episode with Roger preaching, and it's very good. It's so funny. I feel like I have to find something to critique because I've mostly been a gusher this whole season, which I don't have a problem with. It feels like a reward. It's like a reward after last season where I was so devastated by so many decisions that were made. But I am still sad that we never did get the scene with Roger officially being the pastor and the snake. Although for some reason Malva mentions a snake being brought in to a service, so that was weird, but whatever. Again, I'm totally willing to let that slide. I can understand how that could be a difficult scene to do and one that's more for humor and tomfoolery than what we need. but I would have loved it, you know. And now Germain is gone because Fergus and Marcelly have officially moved. I assume that we will get to see them again soon, though, just because New Bern, I believe, is where the Continental Congress is supposed to take place. I think that's what they mentioned. So I'm sorry if I get places wrong, but because of where they have the print shop, I'm hoping that the show will bring us, you know, that we'll see them, or maybe even they will have a storyline in a previous season, you know, because Germain, he does get a point of view in the books eventually, which would be cool to get to see Germain, because I love him so much. So the McNeils have not come to church. Roger comments on this to Claire, and so Claire's like, well, let's take the gals and we'll go see what's happening. And so the usual crew of healers with Bree in tow, so we have Lizzie, Malva, Bree, and Claire go to the McNeils' cabin, and they are ill. They have the bloody flux. There is the mother, father, and 3 children, one of them a baby, and immediately we are in devastation. Claire's opening up the windows, getting fresh, clean water, and we lose the mother and the baby, and maybe even someone else too, but they've passed from this. And so Claire tells him, like, there's no cure for the bloody flux, which, if you don't know, it's dysentery. It means there was something that's polluted. You know, good old Oregon Trail, you've died of dysentery. It's no joke. Like, when that type of bacteria gets into you, your body is either going to be able to fight it off or not. And it can take the young, the old, the strong, the weak. Like, it doesn't spare anyone once it happens. So they need to discover the source of it. So Claire's saying we want to check the water sources. We want to check anything that could have been polluted and shut it down. But it's very clear to see that it takes out a lot of people, and we see the graveyard by the church has very quickly grown. There are a lot of fresh graves. And while they are talking outside, you know, by the graveyard, Claire collapses. And now we have a montage of different people sitting by her bedside. We have this dreamlike sequence of her seeing different things happen. So we do have, like, before it's in Claire's dream sequence, because we have her being sick, we have Lizzie and Bree and Malva and Jamie, like, we see them all, different people, you know, sitting with her. She gets brought up to the big bed chamber, and Jamie, you know, takes turns sitting by her. And we have a scene of Jamie and Malva talking in the kitchen, and there's just a little bit of chatting. And she says, you know, people see your wife as a witch, sir. And she's like, I mean, I really admire her. She's made, like, but it's chatting, and it's a little awkward there. And then we have Claire having these dream sequences. She's dreaming of unrest and a thunderstorm, and it's just very disquieting. And then she sees this hazy thing of Jamie standing at the window drinking, and Malva coming up and putting her hand on his shoulder, and, like, that's all that Claire sees, and it's very hazy. And obviously we will get back to that point very soon about what's going on with that, but she's seeing these very disquieting things. And so she finally awakens, and Roger is the one sitting by her. So he gives her some water, and we noticed that they did cut her hair. They cut all her beautiful hair off, and it looks very chopped. And apparently it was Lizzie and Mrs. Bug, or Malva and Mrs. Bug. I can't remember which two, but Mrs. Bug was involved. They believed it would help her. And Roger was like, Jamie and I weren't here, or we obviously wouldn't have let that happen. And then Bree comes in, and she tells Claire that she's pregnant, you know, as this, like, happy moment. And then we find out she's been out for over a week, and that she was the last, her and Tom Christie were the last people to fall ill. And Claire just kind of thinks, oh, well, what did he have? And he said the same thing as you. He had a fever and something else. We'll get around to that. But so she's just kind of like, oh, okay. Then we have her and Jamie and we have some beautiful talk with them, and she's very, like, nervous about her hair because he loves her hair, his Monty and Doan, his brown-haired lass, and, you know, he tells her, he's like, he just tells her, like, you're very beautiful to me, and I love you, and I choke up about that because obviously we know he loves her and that he thinks she's beautiful. That's not what gets me emotional, but it really is this discussion between them where he really does have this feeling now of what it's like all these times where she has watched him be ill. And he says, like, you were trying to die on me. And she's like, I won't ever do that. I won't ever try to leave you. But it's really like multiple times she's felt like this, where he could go or he could stay. And Jamie's rarely on the other side of that because he lives a very dangerous life. And Claire's usually the one doing the healing, you know? And I think it's just a very, like, shocking revelation for him, right? So then she asks more about what Tom had, because she's like, I want to know what he has. And he was like, he explains that he had fever and headaches, and she's like, that's not dysentery. That's not what everyone else had. And obviously, like, we didn't have the bloody flux. That's literally what its other name is that you get horrible shits. And, like, that's not what they had. So she's like, well, okay, that's interesting. Then she talks to Jamie about the dreams that she had, and that the last time she was in fever dreams, you know, it was the beautiful blue, calming, healing things that she was seeing, and how this time there was a snake. And she said, there's a snake in our home. And Jamie is just like, yeah, okay, whatever. It could just be a dream too. Although Jamie really believes in dreams, so he doesn't, like, shrug it off. He's just kind of like, oh, okay. He hasn't really had those kind of dreams before, so it's just like, okay. So then we can tell it's been a couple days, and Claire decides to walk out and talk to Tom. So she goes to the Fisher folk and comes in to see him. He's kind of, like, curled up at his table. He's not feeling well still, and so she questions his illness. And it's always so interesting to me because they actually have, like, they have this nice little banter kind of to start with, where he's like, you look horrible, your hair looks awful, and he's like, you look like a monk. And she, you know, but it's in kind of this, like, bantery way where Claire isn't, like, offended that he says that to her. And so she asks him questions about his illness, and he's like, yeah, I mean, everyone was sick. And she's like, I know, but we had illnesses that were different from everyone else, and I haven't seen you in a long time. So how did we both have the same illness and it was so different from everyone else's? And he's kind of like, well, can't two people just get sick at the same time? And she's like, I mean, I would really like to test to get a specimen from you to find out. And of course he's like, why do you have to want to do this? And of course it's because she's asking for some fecal matter. And he's like, well, okay, I'm bringing you home. Goodbye. So he shuts that down right away, which is unfortunate because maybe we could have found out what it was, you know. But I mean, she could test her own as well. So anyway, so then she gets home and Jamie's like, you can't just go away on me here. Like, you are sick. And she's like, I know, but if I would have told you where I was going, you wouldn't have let me go. And he's like, duh, that's the point. He says some other more very romantic things because Jamie's amazing. And then we have Claire waking up in bed, and Jamie's not in bed with her. He's on the floor. And she's like, what are you doing? And he's like, well, I didn't want to disturb your sleep. And she's like, come up on the bed. And so then there's some flirting between them and some just, like, I just love these moments so much. I love that in pretty much every episode we've gotten to have just these little things. And so she's like, I just love it. She's like playing with his hands and looking at his calluses, and she's asking him the things he likes about her, and he you know, he's like, it isn't, because he's saying like her hair looks so beautiful, and she's like, does it really? And he's like, it does, because it's your hair, you know. And he says that she's brave and she's proud, and he says, but really what it is above everything else, is that in all the world you are faithful. And that's a beautiful quote from the book that made my heart so happy to hear that. And she says the same to him. And I think this was a brilliant time to reiterate that because of the crap that we're about to see go down. But it's very exciting. So then we have some voiceover. There was a few spots of voiceover in this episode, and I liked that because of how it was used. It was used at points where we were having a time jump, whether it's a couple weeks or whether it's going to be a couple months of time. And so I appreciated how they did that. I know that I could figure it out based on the events that are happening, but I do wish too that we would have like a reset of like what the year is or something like that, because we have skipped forward a little. But again, I'm sure I could figure it out based on the fact that the first Continental Congress is going to happen and Jamie's been invited to speak at it. So we get told about that, which is exciting. And just as Jamie is about to, I think he's getting ready to leave, the Christies show up bringing some drama. And holy crap, you guys, this was so hard to listen to. So I'm a weak-stomached watcher of things, and not for like gross things, but for very uncomfortable conversations. I tend to want to like skip ahead. So when I tell you that it was extremely painful to have to sit through this not because the acting is not great and all of it, it just is like, it makes my skin crawl how intense it all was. I was just like, I can't do it. Because the Christies come and they say that they need to talk to them in private. And Jamie's like, you can talk in front of my wife. So they go inside and Christy says, my daughter is pregnant. And Jamie is like, okay, I hope you're doing okay, basically. And Tom's like, she said she won't say who the father is except in your presence. And Jamie's like, okay, well, tell us who it is. You know, he's trying still to be like very friendly, to be the Laird who is stern but kind, and he's like, you won't suffer for it, tell us who it is. And she is like, sir, how could you say that to me when you know who the father is? And now Jamie is like, okay, no. And then she says, it's Jamie. And she spins this very cleverly planned out story that will seem true to anyone who hears it who doesn't know who Jamie is. She says that it happened when Claire was ill, and that she was there one night comforting him and he was drunk, and when she went to speak with him, she touched his shoulder, which Claire remembers seeing, that he took her and that he ravished her. And Jamie is like, it's very clever of you to say that, you know, to say that I didn't force you. And she's like, I would never say that. And she gets very emotional. Like, it's very well acted, both like the actress Jessica acting as well as Malva acting. Like, it is very compassionate, where she's playing this part of like, why are you making me do this? Like, why are you making me out you this way? And Jamie is just like, he goes like stone cold, where he's like, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing this? And Malva, you know, she says something about like, you've like made me a whore, and Claire slaps her and then walks out. And so now Jamie is standing here listening to this, and we see Mrs. Bug, of course, out in the hallway, listening into this. And he's like, no one is going to believe this. You know, well, he says that, but, and then she starts describing his body and describing the scars on his back and the brand mark here, and there's a scar on his inner thigh, and she's describing all of these marks that we know that he has. And Jamie's like, there are people who've seen me without my clothes on. People know about these things. And she just keeps like describing these things. And so then Tom says, he's like, I'm sure you won't put aside your wife and marry her. And of course we're like, meh. And he's like, so we will accept a contract where you take responsibility for this child and make it one of your heirs. And so he's reading all this stuff out, and Jamie's just like, get out of my house. Get out of my house right now. Also, I skipped over, like, little fucker Alan tried to punch him a couple times, and Jamie is just like, bitch slaps him, and he's like, stop it. And so they leave. And then Claire is out in the stables just trying to process this. She's very upset. And so Jamie, comes out to her, and he's like, how do I explain this? Because anything I try to explain sounds like I'm making an excuse, but this is such a horrible accusation. I feel like I need to defend myself, but like, I don't know what to say. And she's like, well, of course it's horrible. Like, she is such a liar. And we immediately see that, like, Claire did not leave because she believes it, but she is so upset because there are parts of what Malva said that are true. She did see him alone. Like, she did see that, but she knows in her heart, like, she knows this isn't true. And there's also another line, like, I'll butcher it now, but that is done so well from the book. And it's this line where, like, if this is true, then everything we have is a lie. And he's like, what do you mean? And she's like, I shouldn't be here. Bree and Roger and Jem, they should not be here. I left what was comfortable. I left what I knew, and I came back to you. And if you could do this, if you would, cheat on me, have an affair, impregnate this girl, any of those, pick one. If you could do this, then everything we have is a lie. And I don't believe that because you love me. And I know this isn't true. So it's very powerful when it happens in the book too, because it doesn't mean she isn't pissed about this. And that this scenario is unplaying, because it makes no sense at all. So there has to be something bigger going on, but that doesn't mean she isn't pissed about it. She's not pissed at him. And as we'll even see, like, she's not completely pissed at Malva either, because there definitely is more going on here than appears. So then, though, Jamie decides to be the most awkward fool ever, and he's like, there is someone I have to tell you about. And she's like, don't do this right now. Like, literally the way he says it, and she's like, who and when? She's like, tell me this. So we have her like, what are you about to tell me now? It isn't Malva, it's somebody else. And of course, he divulges the situation with Mary McNabb, which was after Claire had went back to the future and right before he turned himself in and have to go to Craigsmere. I always forget. But right before he was going to go to prison. So, but he's sharing about that and that scenario. And how that, like, and too, like, how that kind of felt like cheating to him because he was so in love with her. But obviously Claire is like, okay, well, that doesn't count because, I was sleeping with my husband in the future too, type of thing. So she's like, well, what do we do now? No one will believe this. And Jamie's like, no, everyone will believe it. And in the book, they go a little more into why, but a lot of it has to do with that Jamie is such an upstanding man, and he is in such a position of power that people would immediately believe he would do this. Also, because other people do this. Not everyone is the king of men like Jamie. There are people who, Malva is seen, and I don't get this because I don't think that she's the prettiest girl ever, but many men on the Ridge want to sleep with Malva because she is one of the most beautiful women they've ever seen. So those people who have that jealousy, that feeling in their heart, they want to believe that Jamie would do it because then he's no better than they are. That's something they go a little more into in the book. But I think that the show does well enough of saying that because it's gossip, it's salacious. People want to spread the story and get it around as much as they can. So they need to find out who the real father is. So Jamie is going to do his best to find out who the real father is and see what's going on. We'll see if he can do that. So then we have a scene with Bree and Roger, and Bree is so like flabbergasted by all of it. And Roger has no doubt at all. And he's like, do you think that he could? Like, your father is a man of honor. He would never do this. And of course, Bree shares about her father's affair and that she always believed that her father was faithful to her mother too. So she's like, I would have said that about Daddy, that he would have never cheated on my mom either. And in my notes, I just said, fuck Frank. Come on. And Roger's right. He is also right too. Roger is like, he makes the point of that was a completely different situation because Frank and Claire, like Claire was in love with Jamie for 20 years. And so Frank was doing what he was going to do. Whereas like Jamie and Claire are like true loves to each other. Weak argument that he's making, but also like I get it. Like I've put the frankness to peace, but still I can see it from his point of view, even though I think it's shitty. And I think he could have tried harder to win over the woman that if he really loved her. Just saying. So then we have Claire going to talk to Malva. And Malva is like, why are you apologizing to me? And Claire's like, Malva says this, she's like, someone made a mistake and I'm the one who has to pay for it, which of course it makes it sound like Malva's saying that about Jamie, but it also is clear of like someone did something wrong and she's the one who's bearing the burden. So we're getting these tiny little pieces of what really might have happened and what's going on. And Malva's like, I'm never going to be okay again. Like it's horrible. And Claire is very compassionate towards her. And Malva's like, why are you apologizing to me? And Claire says, she's like, whatever you're trying to do with this, you're never going to come between me and my husband because he didn't do this. And because I know with 100% that he didn't do this, that's not his baby, that means you're in trouble and I want to help you. And Malva's like, just ready to share. And then Alan comes out and fucks it all up and chases Claire away. So then we have Claire working in her garden, and Ian comes up. Or no, wait, I skipped a part first. First, Ian gets in a fight in the woods with some of the men who are slandering Jamie, even though one of those men is one of the men who has fucked Malva. He's, not surprised then that Jamie would fall victim to it as well. And Ian gets in a fight with them. Then we have Claire in the garden, and Ian comes to speak with her. But first, Claire has a flash of Lionel Brown again, scares her a bit, and then Ian is there. And Ian asks if the baby could be his. Now, they don't go into, like, full details of this and, like, explain it because in the book, Claire explains to Ian that part of the reason that him and Emily might have had unsuccessful pregnancies, so many in a row, is that their DNA just might not be compatible with each other. And like that does happen sometimes, that the way that a couple's DNA try to make a baby just doesn't make a valid pregnancy. I actually have a friend in my life that happens with 3 out of 4 chance at a child wouldn't work because of their genes being so different. Anyway, that's all. I'm not a scientist, and they don't fully go into that in the show or anything. But Ian asking, could the baby be mine? That is a bit of a holdover of him asking Claire, like, could I have a baby with someone else? Or was it just Emily that I couldn't have a baby with? And Claire said, yes, it is 99.999% that it's just Emily, anyone else it could be. So Ian is like, the baby could be mine. I could marry her and offer for her. And Claire's like, are you just trying to save Jamie? Because, like, the baby isn't Jamie's. And Ian's like, I know it's not Jamie's, but it could be mine. And then he explains that when they were by the river together, they had sex, and then he felt horrible about it because he's still in love with Emily, and it just didn't, you know, he didn't feel right trying something with her. So interesting there. And then she also shares, or he also shares that there is at least one other man that he knows of that has also slept with Malva. So it could be a couple different men. So there's more information being shared here. So we're starting to piece together a few things. If we look at evidence of the past, you know, we know there was this love charm that she'd done. There were these spells she was cutting fingers off for. We've seen her with someone in the church. We saw her flirting with Ian, and now we know that she had sex with Ian. There's a possibility that there's other people too. So we're building this picture of, is Malva promiscuous? Is she trying to find a husband? Is she trying to get someone to be in love with her? What does all of this evidence mean, right? And I mean, even without forward knowledge, I would say it is very interesting that all of these things were happening kind of around the same time. And it may be that she was trying to find another possible husband and it wasn't working. So now we've accused Jamie. Now, is she doing that to get money and standing for her and her child, or something else? What is it? So then we have voiceover again, which again, this indicates a passage of time. And Claire talks about there being a cloud of darkness that swept over. They were pariahs at their own ridge. This community that they had built is now turning against them. And there are, you know, people turning away when they see her and just, you know, pitying looks and disgust and all these things. And these rumors had spread so far that even, Jamie going to the Continental Congress, he was asked not to represent his area because the rumors of him having an affair had gotten that far away. It's very, very interesting. But Jamie was like, it's not the end of the world. It's fine. We also can tell time has gone by because Claire's hair is growing out a little bit, so that's cool. So then we have, because Jamie was still trying to, like, gain, he's been going to speak with lots of people in the area to, like, build up. So then we get to kind of this final little push here where Claire, like, people have stopped coming to Claire for healing and for help, which is very sad. There's people, like, sick and, like, ill who won't come to her for help, which it is very interesting to me how, like, Claire immediately is ostracized, even though, like, this would be, you know, if we were to believe, you know, that Jamie had done this, like, he's the one who did it. But this does go back to the fact that most people in their area, like, they put up with Claire because of Jamie's good name and who he is. And if he loses his good name, the safety and dignity that come with that, Claire loses it as well. It's very much a team situation. So Claire starts having some flashbacks again, and we see Malva coming towards the door. And to me, it's kind of unclear if she's purposely ignoring Malva or if she's so caught up in her, like, panic attack that she just doesn't notice, but she does, like, lock the door and goes and takes some ether and lays down as we hear Malva knocking on the door. And then Claire has a vision of Malva saying that she's going to take Jamie and that she's pleasured him over and over again and that she's going to have this house and she's going to have his child and all these things. And Claire threatens her with a knife and is like, if you try to come for my husband, I'll kill you. And then she wakes up and she goes out to her garden and she sees Malva in the weeds with her throat slit. They don't make it perfectly clear in the show if her belly is moving, or if Claire just takes the impulse to do that. But at this point, Malva is very pregnant. So, you know, how many months have passed? We're not sure. I do know in the book that when Claire came across Malva, the belly was moving, and that's why she goes for it. But because the baby is still too underdeveloped, she's not able to save it. You know, it's like it'd be at like a 7-month-ish baby or so, where, you know, it's a good sized child, but without modern medicine, it's not going to be saved. You know, the child's not going to be saved, and Claire is left holding the dead child with dead Malva beside her, weeping in her garden. And that's the end of the episode. And holy crap, like, I wasn't expecting the episode to go all the way to this point of it. I thought, like, because I had heard that statement that season 7 would have 3 episodes that deal with season 6, I thought that, like, Malva's death would be, like, the end of this season. Because, you know, at the beginning of this episode, we're not even seeing a baby at all. Like, even once she is telling them that she's pregnant, we don't really see a belly. And granted, we know how well they can hide bellies on this show, because Katrina's been pregnant this whole time. And I was going to comment that as a side note. I definitely noticed the baby bulge more in this one than I had in quite a few. They definitely had her in a very, like, moo type coat this time and everything. But it's unclear to me how many months are skipped. But there also is a thing to say that, like, I mean, with my friends who've had babies, sometimes all the way up to 4 months, there's hardly anything. And then they really will pop out from, you know, like 4 months to 7 months, right? So, I don't know, but it was crazy. I was not expecting us to go through all of that. But as soon as the illness happened, like, I know that was the point that Malva uses to say, like, oh, this is when he bedded me. But it's also clear now that she would have been a lot further along than that, because we saw her with those men in many previous episodes. So it was also, like, unclear, because how much time did they skip, right? Because Claire, her hair hasn't even grown at all yet. She's only been okay for, like, a couple of weeks. So, like, how much time was the first time jump from when she was sick to that? Because, like, how pregnant was Malva supposed to have been? You know what I mean? I don't know. That's a little wonky with, like, the timeness of that, because the time when Claire was ill and Malva claims that Jamie and her had an affair, to the time when they tell, oh, I'm pregnant, that can't have been barely long enough. You know, not that, like, a woman wouldn't know that she was pregnant that soon, because you can, but for her to be, like, claiming that as the pregnancy time, I was like, that's literally been, like, 3 weeks. Like, Claire's still weak and everything. So I don't know. I was confused by that. Again, one of the only weaknesses of this season for me is how the timeline shakes out a little bit. It's strange. And again, Malva using that as an excuse, as, like, the point, doesn't mean that that's, you know, around the time that she got pregnant. She could have just been waiting for the right opportunity that she could use this time, like, oh, I finally have a situation where I was alone with Jamie that I can say is the time it happened. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Because, yeah, she might have been like, oh, now I have a time to say we were alone. I'm going to say that I'm pregnant. Whereas, like, if that was really the only time, well, she says that he's had me dozens of times, but if that was the first time, was that one, she would barely even know that she was pregnant, because it's at most it's been a month. So I don't know. But again, that doesn't ruin it for me. This had so much stuff right from the book, so many lines right from the book, beautiful stuff between Jamie and Claire when she is healing, shocking stuff with Malva. We will definitely have some fallout for that. I would love to know who y'all think is the father of the baby. If you don't know, yeah, I would love to know what you think. And yeah, the 2 weeks from now, again, it will be back. And I do have an Outlander video planned for next week as well, even though I've kind of been waiting for a good time to put it out. So I will still have Outlander content for you next week. It just won't be an episode recap. And then for a scene from the next season, they're trying to find out who murdered Malva. And obviously a lot of people are thinking that it was Claire, because she literally has the knife and they're right there. They're going to say that she wanted the baby for herself. They're going to say that Malva was getting in the way. Like, all those things will happen. So we have, like, that manhunt happening. And then we also have Jamie and crew who are like, who actually murdered her? And the Beardsleys get brought up. I wonder, are we going to have, like, the Lizzie and Beardsley things going on? Like, what's going on with that? And then the war, the revolutionary stuff. So there we go. This was another fantastic episode, in my opinion. Let me know what your thoughts are. I'm so sad there's only 2 episodes left, but I'm also so impressed by this season that where I thought I would be so gypped, what is it? What is the word I'm looking for? I thought I would be so, like, deprived. That's the word I meant. I would be so deprived of content this year. Again, this has been one of the most impressive seasons to me that I've seen in a long time. And so even though we've had fewer episodes, they've been of such high quality and have covered things so well that I'm honestly impressed. And if this is how they continue to do out this show, I will be a happy camper. So thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like this video, comment down below, keep these videos doing well for me. That would be amazing. And I'll see you next time. Bye.